Critical race theory is a way of thinking and teaching about America's past and present by looking at the role of systemic racism, what we've just been discussing. But the very term itself, critical race theory, has become a political flashpoint across the country, especially when it comes to how to teach young people about justice and equity in America.
The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
I will do everything I possibly can to fight to the bitter end until you prove to me that you are not teaching my children that they are racist just because they're white.
That outrage echoes messaging ricocheting across right-wing media.
Critical race theory is racist.
I don't see critical theory, race theory, in our Declaration of Independence.
Much of this can be traced back to a September 2020 directive by then-President Trump, instructing agencies to identify and halt funding of anti-bias training for federal employees that suggests, quote, the United States...
I saw a sign, somebody said, teach facts, not feelings. But it seems like those who are against this quote unquote critical race theory are the people who seem to be in their feelings. Because at the end of the day, teaching the history for what it is teaching the history for what it is. If redlining is a thing, which we know it is, and it still kind of reverberates through the system today, we know this to be a fact. What's wrong with teaching it? If you don't want it to be taught, then what is your angle? What do you have to gain? If teaching that Black people are, by a wide margin, more apt to get stopped and searched by the police, if teaching that, if you don't want that taught, why not? Because these are the facts. Why do you not want the facts to be taught? And you want to try to cover it like, well, teach facts, not feeling. Okay, these are the facts. This is not a feeling. We are 20% of the country and 50% of the people in jail. That's not a feeling, that's a fact. I don't understand. I don't understand what the people, like I said, I say all the time, the people who have a problem, it seems to me, the people who have a problem with this always seems to be the same type of people. The people who have a problem with this being taught are the people who don't want pictures to pop up of their grandmama kicking a little Black kid down the steps for trying to go to school. Mm-hmm. They don't want that out there. They want that shit to just go away. That's why they love to say, why are you still talking about it? Why don't you just forget about it? Because they don't want to have to, they don't want their face rubbed into bullshit. And that's really what it is. And I can't see it no other way than that, because it's for a group of people who love their history, a group of people who still tout and run around and beat their chest, flying the battle banner of the enemy of the state, and say it's about my Southern pride, and you love that past. Why is it that you don't want all the past there? Because if you get that part of the past, you got to get all of the past, right? That's how I view it. But you don't just get the part of the past that you like. Yeah. The past is the past. History is a history. And if you're going to talk about it, it all needs to be discussed, not the part that you like, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's my problem with it, is that, you know, I think I've said before, I long for the day when history is just history. And, you know, it's not African-American history, it's not Chinese-American history, it's history, you know. But what they want to do is, in my opinion, it is those who would presume to rule over us, those who would assume power over the masses, continue to try to hold power. And, you know, it's a lot of fortunes built off of not just slavery, because I don't think slavery is the dangerous part of history for people. I think it's the post-slavery, post-slavery renaissance and how it came abruptly to an end, and a lot of the slaughter and looting and tyranny that was exercised um, during that period to bring it to an end. A lot of the insurrections of state governments that came about, you know, and that, I think that is what people want to keep under wraps, in my opinion. It's not necessarily slavery or anything like that for Black people. I think the most volatile time in history is actually after slavery.
Right. I don't think slavery is the issue. I think the problem that if you look at what critical race, quote unquote, critical race theory wants to discuss, it's the systematic subjugation. We get that people were slaves. What we want to talk about is the laws that you put in place to keep me subjugated. That's what needs to be discussed. That's what needs to be changed. The fact that when there was slavery, there was 3 cops per town. As soon as niggas got free and you wanted to criminalize Black, all of a sudden there's a boom of police officers because we can figure out a good reason to arrest you because of the uniform you're wearing. It's because you walked across the street wrong, and I could put you in jail and get cheap labor out of you. You understand what I'm saying? That's the part that people don't want discussed. Redlining is the part that people don't want discussed. The fact that I can go into a bank with a 799 credit score, I walk in there and don't get a loan, but I do it over the phone and get one fast. That's what they don't want to discuss.
I also believe that what people don't want to discuss, what people are clamoring to try to get around is some of the things that were stolen during that time period, during the birth of Jim Crow, during the time where, you know, they had to, there were Black people who didn't need 40 acres and a mule to get started. You understand what I'm saying? There are people who were established, who had money, who had invention, who had aspired to greatness early, and in one generation have found wealth in one generation because there were skills that were picked up during slavery, and some of those things only slaves knew how to do because then nobody else want to do that shit.
Look, they don't
Once slavery was over, you know, a lot of people, a lot of us built fortunes on those skills. So what they don't want, in my opinion, is a lot of people don't want you to know that the land that they sitting on, that they act like is the land of their forefathers, is actually your land. That's what, you know, in my opinion, they don't want, what they don't want is the legacy of power brokering that was built on the insurrectionist maneuvers in key states that are being strangled right now, like Oklahoma, Alabama, Arkansas, right? These places, there are times in history where these places have very the majority of the state house was Black, and they were subject to insurrection, and they chased people out of those positions. There were towns where Black people were elected, and they weren't elected by just Black people. They were elected by the public, by the people, and those who have always maintained power. That was their first taste of the power, the true power of the vote. And they went in there armed and they killed people and they hung people and they chased people out of town. The look of this country would be severely different if they hadn't done what they had done. But there would be no police brutality and all of that stuff, not in the sense that we see it, you know. And that's what they don't want to talk about, in my opinion. It's not slavery, it's the post-slavery era. They don't want to talk about how soldiers, would come back from World War II, World War I, and be hanged in full uniform with all their medals on their chest. And they don't want to talk about how they killed soldiers and stole all their medals and claimed them for themselves. They don't want to talk about how soldiers were denied commendations and medals and
segueing into that,
and still fought for this country. See,
right.
My problem about
let me real quick. This is going to tie into what you're talking about. So as far as I was in this research that I had going on with critical race theory, it led me to W.E.B. Du Bois, excuse me, and I think it's a book called The Black Reconstruction. And there was an excerpt from his book that talks about the propaganda of history. And one of the things tying into what you were talking about, it says, I'm gonna read this. I want to pull this up on my computer, but long story short, how the facts of American history have in the last half century, this is back then, been falsified because the nation was ashamed. The South was ashamed because it fought to perpetuate human slavery. The North was ashamed because it had to call on the Black man to save the Union, abolish slavery, and establish democracy. That's some heavy stuff.
Right. At the end of the day, this was my rebuttal to when, you got people saying that they don't want critical race theory taught to their children because then their children will hate America. The people who have been fucked over the most don't hate America. So why would your children hate America because they know the truth about it? You're going to love America simply because you love America. You're not going to, I know what my family went through. That didn't stop me from going and joining the service and fighting for this place. You understand what I'm saying? I understand that this is where I am. This is where I live. This is my country. So why would some child all of a sudden, because he learned what his great grandma did or his great pawpaw did, why would him learning that knowledge make him somehow hate the country? That's a silly argument, but that's the argument that you hear. One of the arguments that you hear. I think that what they don't want to learn, or what they don't want their kids to know, is they said that they want to be separate. They want Negroes separated. So Negroes separated themselves, ran their own city, their own police station, own fire department, own banks. What they do, go blow it up. So you don't want us part of you, but then you don't want us by ourselves either. That shit is what they don't want taught.
Yeah, make it make sense. Right.
That's what they don't want taught. And that's really at the end of it. I think if you're gonna, because we said what W.E.B. Du Bois said about history, we know that to be what history is. I think it was Napoleon that said history is a pack of lies agreed upon. The people who win the war write the history. You can write it how you want to if you win, right? So that's basically what's been going on since the beginning of the time. Whenever the Europeans came over here and killed a couple of Indians, and then the Indians kill them back, then you write the newspaper. Oh, well, they're savages that are killing us. They're not going to say, well, we went over there and killed a bunch of women and children first. Not going to say that. They're just going to say, we're attacked by a bunch of savages. They get to, when you win, you get to write what you want at the end.
Yeah.
And that's basically what's been going on here since the inception of this place. They have been writing and rewriting and changing the history at a whim. And that's why you have sayings like the pen is mightier than the sword. That's why you got that. You see what I'm saying? So, and I think if you're going to teach some of it, you teach all of it. That's fair.
I concur.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also believe that, because I've said this before, mainstream white America has been tricked into believing that rich history is their history.
Right.
And it's not necessarily, and that's why they are so quick to galvanize behind the ideologies that are being perpetuated right now, is because they don't want to believe that all of the history is their history. And the history of rich men is not something that you just cling on to, because if George Washington's history was your history, then you wouldn't be living in the trailer park across the street from me.
Right. That's right.
You understand what I'm saying? George Washington's history probably ain't your history. You know, and that's the thing, is we're not just failing to teach African American history. We're failing to unfold the whole tapestry of American history, and we are diminished as a result of it.
Quiet as kept. You can't tell. I'm gonna split it up just to make a point. You can't tell American history without telling Black history, because we done fought in every war that done had in this place. Every one of them. We fought in all of them. So how you gonna? There was whole Black regiments that was gangster, that saved the ass of a lot of them. At the end of the day, there were Black pilots, even though they told biologically the Negro can't fly a plane because their ass is too high on their back. I don't know what they were saying, but you understand what I'm saying. And then
a lot of stuff.
when you put us when you put us in planes, we fly circles around you. And you can't fly in World War II without getting your bomber shot down. And who saved all your bombers? The Harlem Hellfighters, the Red Tails.
Yeah, right? The Tuskegee Airmen.
The Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails. So at the end of the day, it has been proven that, you know, as people, we'll just say minorities. We're talking about minorities in general, but I'm just talking about us. We get met with wall after wall, opposition after opposition, yet we prevail. That is a story they don't want to tell. That is a story they don't want to tell. They want you to think that Black people are all Black people on welfare, and that they because they don't want to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and all this old bullshit that they like to run.
Going back to that propaganda of history, pulling this up again, that
is what they want to run. They don't want to tell you that the housing projects were built for white people. They don't want to tell you that the reason why Black people are there is because they were forced to be there, and then the government subsidized, the government underwrote loans so the poor whites could get out of that area and move to the suburbs. They're not gonna tell you that.
Well, and they're also not gonna tell you
that's the history.
They're also not gonna tell you that the reason why Black people are so highly concentrated in urban areas is because a lot of them was ran off their land in the country.
Well, that too.
I mean, lynch mobs and shit. They're not gonna tell you that either.
It's all
like I said,
but all that, huh?
Like I said, the implications of post-slavery history cut so deep and is so recent that it is literally an erosion of the power base of some individuals, and that's why they don't want it to come out. They don't want the complete history to be told. And we're not just talking about Black people, we talking about all people. Because it's people out here that's got a history, and they just get wild blind. And they still
the powers that be
when they shouldn't be.
The powers that be, and I look at it more through a more cynical eye, just because sometimes I got jock in me. But I think that some of it is simply these senators these senators, these governors, all these people with this money, when you find out how, what was done for them to get in their position, how many Black folk or Asian folk or Hispanic folk, how many bodies is under their foundation to get them where they are, they don't want that to come out. And the more you look, the more you're gonna find. We live in an information age, and the more you dig, the more you'll find. And they don't want the digging to start. That's what I think too.
And that's true. Did you know those types of things, even those aspects of history, are things that are glossed over? They want us to believe. That's why we keep making the mistake of having these summits, and where we all get together, and we need Instagram and Facebook to tape our shit while we sit up and have strategic meetings on how we gonna do things and try to answer questions and analyze situations so that we can figure out a way to move on it. The reason why we feel like we need to broadcast that is because how history is presented to us. There was a greater application of guile and stealth in the execution of the Constitution of the United States than we are ever been led to believe in school. If you think that them dudes all got up in their Sunday best with their shoes with the belt buckle on the toe and shit, and they little ruffly shirts and petticoats and stuff, and they came and got together and had that little American flag, the British cargo company or something like that. I forget the name of the company, but if you think they sat there with that little flag under the table and kicked back and signed it, and all of them was in the same room together and arguing over it, and John Hancock was just like, listen, if you guys are gonna be bitches, I'm gonna sign it first. That ain't the way that shit went down, buddy.
But
I'm sorry.
We can. I will go out on the limb. Hold on. I'll go out on the limb and say it went down like that. But they did that shit in a boat hole somewhere up under something. They didn't do that shit in with the windows out. They hid and they did that shit under cover of darkness because that shit was treason. So they wasn't just sitting at so-and-so house doing it.
I guarantee you it didn't go down like no grand meeting because, you got to understand it's just the same. It's the same as when the Masonic Order was established before they became a recognized organization in England and were able to receive charters from the Queen. They were established in secrecy. That's why, you can't just assemble in other countries like you can in America. And you don't have the same rights as you have in America. That's why the Bill of Rights was established. It wasn't no probable cause. It was we think your ass is doing it. And if they thought your ass was doing it, they was gonna come fuck you up. So it's not like, if there was no way that they could all meet in a boat hold or any other hold, they probably, I think it was a dude who carried this document around in secrecy and collected signatures. That was probably the best. When you think about strategically, that's probably the only way you can get that done. You may have had some small groups meet in secrecy to draft the Constitution, but let's be real, the possession of this document with no signatures on it, right, was punishable by death. That is not something that you can just walk around with.
I want to ask a question here, because clearly identity politics, I think I've mentioned it before, is taking a toll on how critical race theory is or it's influencing the way whether or not it's going to be banned or accepted, whatever the case is. I guess my question is, in what form should identity politics exist?
Can you define identity politics?
No form. Now, I know what it is. it's a political view. Has something to do with your race, your religion, your sexual orientation, basically trying to implement policies because of anything that'll separate you. I think there's not a place in America for identity politics, because we are a nation of a bunch of people. How you gonna govern me by my blackness, or govern a gay dude by your straightness? Or you understand what I'm saying? I think It's all bullshit, and it's another tool to keep people fighting and being separate, in my opinion.
I agree wholeheartedly, because at the end of the day, you need to identify as a citizen of the United States.
Look, like the whole argument about gay marriage. That's a great one. Okay. I feel like if gay people want to be married, who the fuck am I to say whether they should or they shouldn't? Like the gay marriage argument. If you don't agree with gay marriage, then don't get gay married. Right? Don't marry a dude. If you're against gay marriage, don't marry a dude. The argument is always religious in nature. But you tell me that this is a country of free religion. You tell me there's a separation of church and state. That's what you tell me. But then you always want to make policy when it comes to your religion. You see the hypocrisy in that foolishness? So that's where I'll be like, I get that we're supposed to be Christian country. I get it. I get that, you're Christian, you follow the word of the Bible. I get all of it. But you can't tell me that this country was based on freedom of religion, but then you're mad at all of the Muslims. You can't tell me that this country is freedom of religion, but then you want to impart your religion on everyone. That's not freedom, right? I mean, so I think the whole thing is foolish, because it like I said, at its core, I'm gonna get a jock here. At its core, it's throwing another immovable object, you know what I mean, at the baseline of all of this stuff. And that's the major issue, say race relations. And it's just some more shit that got us pointing off in several different directions instead of focusing on what's important. That's what I think.
I just feel like, man, we need to start taking a more holistic approach to how we teach history, number one. And there are things to be gained from learning history as a whole. Number one, history, those who don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it. And those who cannot look back have no idea how to move forward, because when you don't have history, you have no point of reference. If you walk into a house and you lose sight of the front door, how the hell can you find the back door? You need to know where you coming from in order to understand if you're moving in the right direction and your intended direction. So the reason why I say that is because I believe we are doomed to repeat that history if we keep trying to hold it back. And I believe the very people who are trying to deny that history are dooming their children's children to repeat it on the receiving end. So the very thing, you know how they say, you know that old saying, a man can set out, he can attempt to avoid his destiny, and set out on the road to meet it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what's going on here is that you should be teaching the history. You should be acknowledging what's going on. You should be including everyone and recognizing everyone as Americans that way that we won't want to subjugate anyone. We'll say, let's make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone again.
Right. Because my
when
thing
you
is,
try to hide it and you try to keep everything separated and you try to maintain the upper hand, when the worm turns, and it will, you're gonna find yourself on the bad end of it.
and this is what I think the problem is, in my view. Theory newly formed. The problem, the crux of all of this, I think, is if the history is taught how it's supposed to be taught, those who presume to control us are gonna, well, not even those, the regular people, the masses, will understand how strong we are together. Because we prove it. When we knuckle down and all work together, we get shit done. We prove it in every war, every conflict. You remember when 9/11 happened and white people and black people was joining hands against the Arabs? But you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Everybody, yeah, you know what I mean? When we come together on some shit, and usually when we get attacked on some shit or something bad happened, Pearl Harbor, it was nigga. Pearl Harbor, niggas was joining the military just like white folk. Everybody was getting out of here going to work. You understand what I'm saying? When we come together on some shit, we are pretty fucking powerful. And I think the whole idea of critical race theory at the end of the day will teach all those poor people that we all get fucked over. Because if you teach the history like you're supposed to teach it, it all gets out, and we all getting fucked over. And at the end of the day, if we come together on some shit, we can truly make some change. As long as poor people are fighting on behalf of the rich people, just like if you go back to the slavery days, you got the slave, then you got the overseer. The overseer was some poor ass dude with 2 teeth in his head, but he was doing the work for the master because he didn't have enough time to do the shit. He was too busy drinking mint juleps on the porch. So he had a poor dude run around and chase another poor dude. So that poor dude can feel like he's superior to that poor dude. You understand what I'm saying? And that's what, in my opinion, what the police force is today. It's a bunch of poor cats wrangling up more poor cats. You understand what I'm saying? It's the same, in my opinion, it's the same thing.
I can dig that, man.
I can get down with that, man. You know, I've often said that they really don't talk about, like I said, they fool people into believing that the rich history is everybody's history.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't tell you that, you know, in the South, you got people going, the South will rise again, and I believe in the Confederacy. Well, your ancestors didn't, and your great uncle got hanged because he didn't want to go and fight for slavery when he didn't own no slaves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of these people, their ancestors were hung on a tree right next to black folks because they didn't want to fight. They didn't want to be transcripted into or conscripted into slavery, into into indentured servitude to fight on behalf of the South and behalf of the rich.
Mm-hmm. I'll do you one better. And Jerry L gonna like this. A wise man named Tim White said one time, he said that Americans have a unrealistic view of how they got here. White Americans have an unrealistic view on how they got here. Black people know how they got here. Chinese people know how they got here. You know what I mean? But white people have an unrealistic view on how they got here. They think that, well, you know, they came over on the Mayflower to, he's like, man, look, let me tell you something. The people who came here was the losers. The winners, the people who were winning in England They ain't get on the boat. Why? They winning. Why the hell would they come over here if they winning where they at? They staying where they at. The people who came here were the people who weren't doing very well over there. So they came over here to a new area to stake their claim. And you know, the criminals of the world, half the people was indentured servitude. They come over here and the criminals are working on their freedom. You know what I mean? So they get free and do whatever it is they do to hustle to come up in the world. You know what I mean? And then you understand what I'm saying? He's like, there was not one time there was discussion where some guy was like, children, let me tell you something. I know we're doing great and we just made all of this money. We were hanging out with the king just last week and you played with his kids in his backyard. And I'm going to tell you what we're going to do this summer. And hear me out now. Hear me out. We're going to get on this boat. Now, one time was that discussion had by some rich dude already over there. He was already rich. What would he need to come here for? The winners did not leave. The losers left. But they want to act like, you know, like you said, rich people history is their history. That's not the case. These cats came over here. They were religious rejects. They were all kinds of snake worshiper, all kinds of the dregs of that society is what came in.
Yeah, they were the pirates. You know, I think a lot of people don't really put two and two together with that. You know, you're like, okay, look at okay, but you don't put together that could have been the freaking Pilgrim.
I mean, it's just like Australia. I don't want to really get far off subject, but we'll use Australia as an example. Australia was a penal colony. England was send their hardened criminals and drop them off on their island and let's see you later. That country was is the ancestors of murderers and criminals and shit. That was what they did. You know what I mean? So why do you think that this place is any different? They got this same thing that Castro did to Jimmy Carter back in the 80s. He sent all of that bullshit the hell out of Cuba. You know what I mean? Up here to Miami is the same thing that England did. So they sent all of their bullshit across the sea. That's it.
Wow. I often tell Jock this, man, there's something about you 70s babies. I'm an 80s baby. You know, but y'all got a chance to see a whole nother side of history. It was at a special time. You know what I'm saying? Like it was shifting around that.
Yeah, you know, when I first started going to school, you know, segregation was supposed to have ended in what, 60, let's say 65, 66.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Dependent, but you know, it's always contingent on when your town start acting right. You understand what I'm saying? Wow. I know that whether it be me misremembering, but I remember my first couple of years of school, I never saw a white kid in my class. Then it started to happen in the inner city and then it started to happen. I went up and down the street and played with kids. I never saw a white kid in my neighborhood. Never. You understand what I'm saying?
Big. Yeah.
Never happened. Yeah. Never. I mean, till I moved out of East Cleveland, and then we moved to a suburb, Wickliffe. That's where, you know, that was suburb. There was white folk out there. You know what I mean? But in the inner city, I never saw white kids in my neighborhood playing football with us, playing sideline pop, tackle in the street. You know what I mean? We didn't want no white kids.
Well, that's how it was in Benton Harbor. Benton Harbor was predominantly white, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the schools weren't necessarily redistricted. What they did is they said, well, if you want, you can apply for your children to go to a different school in a different district.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I went to Liebrook Elementary in Eau Claire, Michigan, you rode an hour and a half to school.
Wow.
Right, because we went out to Eau Claire from Benton Harbor. So, I mean, It was at least, well, I say it was at least 45 minutes. I would say an hour and a half because of all the stops. But you would go to Eau Claire and it was all white kids. And I remember being called a nigger. I remember being chased around by the eighth graders when I was in the fourth grade. You know, I remember all that shit. So it's still like we are at the tail end of the age of Jim Crow, at the age of legal oppression.
Yeah, because you know those people that lived in there in that system. Now we're talking about my parents, our parents. You know what I mean? Because my father was born in 1940, so my father was an adult during the movement. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. My father was in the army during the movement. That's why I say, you know, my father from Maysville, Kentucky. I know without a shadow of a doubt that dude would come home on leave and got in his uniform and got to give up his seat to a white dude. I mean, you break it all the way down. Like I said, King was assassinated, what, 68, 69? I was born 71. So it's so close. That's why I said racism is such an issue still today, because everybody's still here. Right. We're not far enough away from the movement yet. You know what I mean? And I think right now it's making these are the last gasps of that era. That's what we kind of going through, the last gasp of that era. Because if you go back to the 80s, you know what I mean? I'm sure that was racist, but it was a lot quieter. We are the world, black people, white people, everybody get together on some stuff. Let's help Africa. Right. But
yeah. Well, I think that racism is being kept alive by greed and hedonism.
Well, yeah. I know that.
You know,
I'm just talking about older. The older. This is why I say this. It's a slide. We're getting to death now because all of those people are in their 80s. You know what I mean? So a lot of that people who lived that are starting to die out. You see what I'm saying? And then it'll still be here, but a little less further when you start getting to the generations past it. That's why I'm saying, you know, they say time heals all wounds. My grandkids will have grandkids, and we probably won't even be having this discussion. But we're having it now because it's still so close to the movement. It's not far enough away. Everybody's still alive. I mean,
well, time heals all wounds. I mean, it depends on what you mean by that.
Because you got dudes.
Because time will take away pain. Time will take away pain, but without the right attention, time will cause a wound to fester.
Well, yeah, but
that's what happened here. I think that's what happened here.
I'm talking about with the further we get away from the movement. This is what I mean. The further we get away from the movement, you're going to always have white people teaching their kids hate. Mm-hmm. Simply because, you know, you just got to look at the numbers. We're 20, let's say 25% of the country, right? But we live in LA, New York, New Jersey.
Yeah, East Coast.
Cleveland, yeah, exactly. Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Atlanta.
Yeah.
You know, you understand? We live, but the whole country is country. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You get outside of the city, you drive east on 70 from downtown. In 15 minutes, you in a cornfield. You understand what I'm saying? The whole state is country, and that's where they live. We're just concentrated in the city. You know what I mean? So you got a 15-mile radius, a 30-mile radius in Cleveland, and say a 20-mile radius in Cincinnati. But you got the whole landmass of Ohio that's just white people. You understand what I'm saying? So the numbers is going to state that there's going to be people that's going to teach their kids what they teach their kids. However, a lot of kids don't stay in the country no more. They want to get to the city life. So they get to the city and get to hanging out with folk, make a friend or two. That might change it. But you'll still get those people. That's why I mean time healing wounds. Because as the time goes on, those numbers of those people, I think, will shrink. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. But the problems you're going to have is if because I see some of it today. We teach our kids something that our parents never taught us. So we teach our kids hate now. You see what I'm saying? Man, fuck them white people. They're white, you know what I mean? We starting to act like they act towards us. You understand what I'm saying?
That's interesting. Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? I was never my mama from Selma, Alabama. You understand what I'm saying? But she never taught me, man, fuck them white people. Never. Matter of fact, they moved me to Somerset, Ohio, where I was the only black kid in the school system. Not in the school system. Just me. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But what that did was prepare me to where I can function in any situation. I can sit down with a bunch of white people, have the same conversation. You know what I mean? I can sit down with a house full of Mexicans, you know what I mean? Give them my broken Spanish. You understand what I'm saying? But what putting me in these situations just helped me grow as far as my, dealing with.
Will can stand. He can stand up, talk to anybody.
This nigga stupid.
What you gonna do?
But
what you gonna do? Maybe you can work as a maid and somebody empty out somebody's slop job. Or maybe they'll let you work on a railroad.
Yeah, let it clean out the caboose. Stupid. But no, I think, but the problem, this is what I mean. That's what I mean by time heals all wounds. The further we get away from that part of our history, as far as the country, the civil rights, the struggle, because, it was pretty volatile. Dudes would get on the bus and young white men would throw Molotov cocktails in the bus because niggas was on it. It was a pretty volatile part of our history as a country. But the further we get away from that, that's what I mean. I think that it'll be kind of like it was when I was in that school. After a few months of motherfuckers getting to know me, by January, February, March maybe, somebody called me a nigger, and my white friends were like, man, you talk to him like that. Time. Right? When I first got there, everybody was like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
But by March, April, I ain't got to be back to back because it was me and a dude who was a Shawnee Indian.
Wow.
And it was a couple times we was back to back on the schoolyard, like this is what y'all want to do. But by March,
now
April, here's what I'm gonna
interject and say, well, remember when I said earlier, those who don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you repeat it the same way. And remember I said when the worm turns, and it will, because melanin is a dominant gene, and one day you're gonna have more black people in this country or more people of color in this country than you will have whites. And Bill was making lends credence to what I said earlier. What'll happen is that for the first time in the history of us, we started doing something on a larger scale than we've ever done before. And that's teach our children hate.
Right.
And what does that do? That as we go on, even if we thrive and we become economically stable and our communities become more and more affluent, that wound, there's still, unless we get in there and clean that out, and that's by acknowledging history in its totality and moving forward as a people, that wound will fester into hate. And I think that is kind of where we are right now. Is we're at a pivotal point where, I mean, we got a choice. We can leave, we can rip the dead skin off and go in there with some betadine soap and some gauze and clean that thing out and take some antibiotics, or we can act like we don't see it, let it heal over, scab up, and become an ugly scar for all time.
Right.
And I think that's where we are in this country, and that's what the quote unquote critical race theory is the body's attempt to purge the wound, to push fresh blood into the wound and get all of that infection out. And get it open.
You know why I want the critical race theory to be taught? Because once that gets taught, then you can get down to the crust of the whole situation. That race is an illusion. It was made up about 600 years ago to rationalize colonialism, going to these countries with all these brown people and killing them up. So you had to come up, because I'm sure there was people saying, man, why are we doing that? Well, because we're superior, and this is why. You understand what I'm saying? But the whole idea of race was made up. It was never a color. That's why if you go to Japan, you go back far enough, you some black ass Japanese samurai. Keep going, go back far enough. You know what I mean? That's why if you go to old parts of Europe, there's black, big, wide nose statues carved on obelisks on the sides of buildings with afros and gold, because the Moors were revered in Europe. They loved the Moors in Europe. But when it was time to enslave them, motherfucker, we threw that part of history away. You understand what I'm saying? So then that's what I mean. So I want it taught just so we can get, all right, that was fucked up. Now let's talk about what's real history. Let's talk about the fact that, do you want to say that the Greeks were the father of civilization, but the whole idea of democracy was gleaned from the women in the Nile Basin? But you got to reteach all the history if you really want to get into history. You got to reteach it all. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, I think what we got to do first is reteach the history in this country.
You're right, but I'm just saying the reason. But because we're dealing with,
and the reason I say that is because we so cut off from who we are as a people in this country as Black Americans. Is you got Black people going all the way back to the Nile Basin. You got Black people going all the way back to Musa to try to find inspiration for their life, when is powerful. Madam C.J. Walker, J. Patterson and Sons, is powerful Black examples of Black people. Sergeant Henry Jackson is powerful.
The boys, Black and
Black
right. But what I'm talking about is it's powerful examples of Black excellence that show that we have a culture, a long-standing culture in this country as this people, because right now we are an amalgamation, sort of like we are our own melting pot. We are our own dark-skinned melting pot of people, to the point where you can't just say we African. Some of us are Indian or Native American. Some of us are African. Some of us are Hispanic. There are some of us who are Jamaican or Caribbean, and we all are a blend. We've been thrown in this corner together, and we all have worked great wonders from this small corner of society, and it should be acknowledged.
I want to touch on, I'm glad you brought that up, because the issue, y'all were talking about Black and white issues, and I want to ask that question because the issue is no longer Black and white. So when you start talking about all these different cultures, It's not so much as united as you may say. Now we have all been lumped together in groups, but there's
But
still division
it's not united
amongst
for
those.
this reason.
Right.
It's not united for this reason. There's a level of ignorance about your history. There's a level of denial of your history. For instance, I was talking to a guy, I'm giving a great example, that you said that. I was talking to a guy on Facebook, and they were talking about what's her name? Vice President lady.
Kamala Harris?
Kamala Harris. Because she's part Jamaican and part
and I think Eastern
right.
Indian, I think, yeah.
And part Jamaican, I think. Jamaican there somewhere. Yeah. And somebody said that Jamaican is not Black. Okay. So I was like, well, no, Jamaica's not African, because she's like African American, African descent. And somebody said Jamaican is not African. And I was like, why would you think Jamaica's not African? And he's like, Jamaican is not African. Don't be trying to read Wikipedia. I said, man, this ain't even hard. I said, the history of Jamaica is easy. The people that's in Jamaica were Western Africans that was brought over here, just like in the Middle Passage, just like the African Americans that's in America. That was just where they stopped. They used those Africans, they enslaved those Africans to harvest sugarcane. They killed as many of the indigenous personnel in that area that they could, and they assimilated the rest. This is all this is history, you know what I mean? And he's like, I deny any African narrative. I was like, well, then there's no reason to talk to you. Because if I talk to a guy from Ghana and be like, hey man, I was talking to a dude about Jamaica and Haiti and all those islands over there. I said, and where are they from? He said, they're from Ghana, Nigeria. They know. So why don't the people over here know? You as an African, they'll tell you.
Oh yeah.
You know, well, that's the same reason. You know, that's the same reason I was talking to this young lady, and she said, "Why do you think so many young men want to be women right now?" And I said, because that is the position of power in the modern household. Mm-hmm. Right? Wow. Why would you
just like that?
Why would you?
Yeah, I can see that.
Huh?
We're drawn to power.
But so, you gotta twerk your booty to get it.
I think that's the only form. That's the only form they know it as. That's the only form they know it as.
The thing is, if that's the only example of power that you see, right? And as a man, you gravitate towards power because power is what you need to establish yourself in this world as a man. So that's your nature. So what are you going to do? If you see your father as a powerless, absent being, then who are you going to cling to as an ideal of power?
Well, I would think that would just make you be be submissive to some woman, not try to be one. That's a
what about individuals who are not submissive in nature? What about individuals who seek out dominance and they don't have a point of reference to do it from the standpoint of a man?
Right.
Then they seek it out any way they can. And I think that's what you see when you see individuals who don't want to identify as African, who don't want to be called Black, and they look just like you and me, you know. What they don't want to do is they don't want to be identified with weakness. Mm-hmm. And because they are weak, their perception of weakness is the image of themselves. So they would deny that.
Mm.
And that's basically where that comes from. Why that's a whole situation is because you got people out here who are clamoring for some semblance of control over their life.
Mm.
And the only way they feel like they can do that is to have some type of social status. So they're trying to get it through some false identity.
I guess that's fair. I mean, that's a interesting theory. I could take it. I could take it. Because I don't mean it's like the numbers are astronomical. I know they say God don't make no mistakes, but it seemed like to me he made a lot of them. The way everybody want to be something different.
I feel you, man.
Well, there's a Japanese proverb that says corruption causes justice to appear as insanity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you regard justice as truth, then corruption or perversion of individuals will cause the truth to appear as an insanity. Now, the very notion that God makes mistakes is hubris on a level that is beyond blasphemy. Okay?
That's right.
The very notion that God makes mistakes is crazy, unheard of.
I mean, I feel you, but hold on. I mean, if you're gonna go there, I mean, can it be said that there was some mistakes that were made on that end? I mean, because if you just really want someone to do what you tell them to do, then they would do it. You know what I'm saying? And we're talking about all-knowing.
It depends on your logic. It depends on the logic that your faith is built on.
Right.
When you understand that. Go ahead.
I was like, you look at that situation, it ain't no different than the situation that you have today. You have free will. You can choose to do what you want. That ain't no mistake. That's putting it in your hand. If you fuck it up, you fucked it up. You can't put it on him.